Hi, everyone. This is Heather Hodges. I'm an organizational psychologist. Welcome to my show. This is the place where we say I'm in to creativity, bold thinking, transformational growth, and meaningful conversations. Today's guest is a dynamic leader with a proven track record in operational excellence, strategic growth, and building healthy, high-performing teams. Monique Thornquist is the CEO of Inteli-Care, where she brings nearly 2 decades of experience leading teams in home care. She holds an MBA and has been recognized for her ability to drive results while never losing sight of what matters most: people. Monique is passionate about building organizational culture, mentoring emerging leaders, and ensuring that every team member feels a sense of purpose and belonging. Monique, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for saying I'm in to having this conversation.
Yes, I'm in.
Yay. Well, you've held a lot of different roles in your career and a lot of roles across home care. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and where you are now and what you're doing?
Sure, I'd love to. So, as you stated, CEO of Inteli-Care here in Albuquerque. We have about 8 locations across the state. And it's been a transition. I did hospice for 10 years prior to switching to personal care. And it was a little scary, to be honest. I'm kind of into the career ladder, and, changing it into a completely different industry was a little terrifying, but it's been a great move for me and my family, and I love the team. So I think to give you some insight into how I actually got into leadership and healthcare and all of that, I'll tell you a little bit of a story. So I think you may know this. I've known you for so long. But I know not a lot of folks do. Yeah. So I kind of fell into leadership. And when I say that, what I mean is when I was 22 and my mom passed away, and I became the kinship guardian of my little brother and sister. So I am the oldest out of 5. So probably really born a leader with being the oldest, of course. You see all those memes about females, the firstborn female and the oldest child. And I think that definitely holds true. But I really feel like I was called to lead at that point. And, there's a higher purpose. I'm someone that truly believes that everything happens for a reason. There are no coincidences. So when my mom passed away and I became the kinship guardian over my brother and sister, it was really my calling to lead them. And we are, I still lead them. Even as they're adults, they're always my babies. So it started there and then progressed. And I'm so fortunate to have had that experience because that really impacted the way that I lead people as a whole. And then when I actually had my own son and becoming a mother, I think that really just supercharged my ability to be able to lead.
Thank you for trusting us with that story. When I met you, I instantly knew that you were an old soul, that you just carried wisdom beyond your years. And I think now we know why you were asked to lead from such a young age.
Well, thank you for that. I do consider myself an old soul, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's for those of us who know you, it's clear. So, well, I have had a front row seat to watching you over the last several years, and recently getting to see you in your role at Inteli-Care as a CEO and watch you pour into your team. And all of these years, one of the things I've noticed about you is your care for people, that you deeply care about other human beings. You're an exceptional leader. You love metrics. You love the data. You geek out on all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the people. When you think about organizational culture, how do you define that, and why is that so important to you?
When I think about organizational culture, I think about, people are your number one asset. And yes, numbers are important, and your P&L is very important. All of those things are very important to run a business, as you stated, as we know. However, your number one asset when you are looking at your balance sheet is always your people. And so when you look at your culture and you look at your engagement, I think that you can have a great strategy, right? Like you have this great strategy on paper. You can have all of the steps, like on paper looks phenomenal, but if you don't have the culture and the engagement, you will never be able to execute on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like a lot of companies might get that wrong.
Yeah.
Might get that backwards. That they put the numbers first and the strategy first instead of the culture and the engagement and the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, when you step into a new team, how do you assess the existing culture? How do you know maybe and measure what that culture is like?
That's a really good question. I think you have to use what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Not every company has ever, some people don't do, employee engagement surveys.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, the level of the employee may be a little different, right? So you may have staff that are very new in their career versus you may have some very tenured staff, right? So I think when I came in, I can use my most recent experience kind of as an example, but I think when you come in, the way that you can really gauge a culture is walking around, sitting with people. My husband jokes, he thinks that I have a sixth sense. He always tells me, he's like, I think you're part witch, like, you wiggle your nose and things happen, right? And I laugh too, because I do think your gut can tell you a lot. And I know that sounds so silly to some people. You meet people and they're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. But when you truly take the time, I did sit-ins with every single employee when I started here, and I sat with them and I learned what they did and how they were doing. I ask a lot of questions and open-ended questions, of course. I always joke around, it's because I'm nosy. I am a little nosy, but it's truly because I care and I want to know, like, what do you do? Like, how does your work impact the organization? Do you know how your work impacts the organization, right? And how does your work affect others' work? There's a domino effect. And so I think being able to just walk around, listen. My first 2 weeks, I sat at the front desk and picked up the phone. I answered phones. I wanted to see what were our customers, our clients, our members, our staff, like what were they saying? And so I think that's really how you can gauge kind of where you're at. Also the engagement of the staff, right? Like, do you see a lot of people calling out? Are they even showing up to work? Are they on time? When I was doing the sit-in, like, did they know what the why was? What was the North Star of the company? And I think that tells a lot.
So leadership by sit-in.
Yeah. All hands on deck.
Yeah. So what did you learn that those first couple of weeks when you were answering the phone and sitting shoulder to shoulder with the team that you had just begun to lead?
I learned how much they cared. It was phenomenal. I mean, I think they were really loyal and they liked what they did. I think where they were lacking was really like, they didn't know the potential that they had. And, call me an optimist. I know. I can be overly
You're an optimist.
I am. But I always see, like, I feel like I see the best in people. I try to see, like, the potential, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? Do you want to stay here? Like, what are your dreams? And I want to hear all about you and your likes and your dislikes. And so I think learning, like, the team had really hired great people. And I've always said, like, it really starts with hiring. You have got to hire A players. And as difficult as it is to have a vacancy on your team, if you have A players, it will make or break you. And so seeing that we had the right people was like, I hit the lottery, right? Like, you hit the employee lottery. But being able for them to see their potential, I think that was like what was lacking. And so where can we develop them? Where can we empower them?
What do you think it did for them when you spent that week getting to know them and learning their jobs and what they do?
I don't think they knew what to think of me.
Who is
I
this
think
lady Monique sitting right beside me?
it was very different than they had experienced, I'm sure.
Uh-huh.
I kind of created, I mean, I will say, I think partially I did come in kind of like a wrecking ball. It was not in a bad way, but it was like, I come in and I'm very positive and I say good morning, probably annoyingly every single morning. I'm walking up and saying, how was your night? And then I'm just in their business for, a half a day trying to figure out their job. And so I think they really didn't know what to think of me because they hadn't had that happen before. But I did have to pave kind of my own orientation. And I didn't, in my mind, it was like, okay, in my first 30, 60, 90 days, how can I make the most impact? Whether that's the low hanging fruit, the easy stuff, or kind of the long term stuff. Like I need to know what each person is wanting. So yeah, I think that they didn't know what to think of me, but now they're very appreciative. And now we've actually modeled that entire, like my entire onboarding kind of plan. We model everyone's onboarding plan with that, because even though we may not hire someone to sit at the front desk, or we may not hire someone for the billing department, we need every single person to understand how their role affects each department. And by them not doing one piece of their role, there's a domino effect, and it can be a negative or a positive one. And so that's what I learned by doing those sit-ins, and I felt like it was important long term. And so it's worked so far.
Yeah, beautiful. And you think about that domino effect, because sometimes you don't know upstream or downstream how your job affects everybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you have led a lot of different teams, both in your role now and throughout your entire career. So I'm curious, what do you notice about a strong team culture? What does that feel like day to day? How do you know if it's working?
Oh my gosh, it's like hard to describe. I feel like it's just pure like happiness. Like if you walk in, people are actually happy to be here. Right? Like people are coming to work. Your retention is amazing, right? Like you're not having to rehire people. You have people that are engaged. They're kind of living and breathing that North Star of the company day in and day out. So it's almost like it's not a strategy or a chore or, another check mark on your to-do list. It just happens because people want to be here. Your values as an organization align with their values as a person. And that's huge. I mean, I can tell you firsthand, the minute that my moral compass and my values don't align with an organization, that is the moment that I have completely checked out, because I can't be a leader and stand in front of my team and say, we're going to do X, Y, Z. If I don't believe in it, they're going to see right through me. And I think that's where it is. So like they know when that maybe there's a top down initiative that I need to obviously roll out, and I need their buy-in. But if I don't buy in, if I'm not buying in and I don't agree with it, like how can I get them to buy in? And so I think that's where when you walk in and you know that it's not a top-down directive, it's something that they're living and breathing, and they believe in it because they know that you believe in it. That's how you can really feel it. And again, I think it goes back to what I said before, which was it's just the engagement and like people actually showing up and teamwork. I joke around like teamwork makes the dream work, but it's true. I mean, I have the front desk that will be like in our team's channel saying like, hey, I need a break, and there's 10 of us jumping in to say like, we'll come up there, we'll help you, we'll answer the phones. And like, it's not someone that's going to say like, oh, that's not my job description. It's everyone's job. So that's really nice.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's a great example, because when you hear that, it's not my job description, that speaks volumes about the culture, about the engagement, about whether people are willing to help each other out and have that teamwork, like you said. Yeah. Well, I'm curious on the flip side of that, what are some of the kind of subtle signs that culture might be struggling even before it shows up in a performance metric like an engagement survey? How do you know when the culture is not doing well?
There's so many ways. I think, and I don't think they're subtle, but I mean, I guess that goes back to, I said to you earlier, kind of off script, culture is something that I think comes very natural to certain leaders. So I think they're the first ones that can kind of see when something is, maybe going to the wayside. I do think it goes back to that sixth sense that my husband jokes about, but I can often pinpoint, like, the same day, if someone is either like having an off day, something has gone wrong, they're starting to fall off of the engagement wagon. So I'll give you a good example. I think it was the first quarter I had started, still learning, still not really knowing everyone very well, what makes them tick, what motivates them. But I noticed someone kept calling off this specific person. And, I think of three things, and I always say this: when you have someone that is habitually calling off, there's usually three top reasons, and it's they hate their job. I mean, plain and simple, they just don't want to be here. They hate their job. They have something going on, right? Like something maybe at home is going on. It could be work related or not work related, but and at the end of the day, of course, like, we have to keep their privacy, but it could be something totally unrelated to the job. Or they are bored. So they don't hate the job, right? It's just that we're not challenging them. They need something, right? So I pulled that employee in. I think they had missed like 12 days in a span of 2 months. But they were brilliant. This person, brilliant employee. So I pulled them in and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And this gives them the opportunity to be truly honest, but, maybe not divulge if it is something personal, because you don't want to cross the line. And sure enough, it was, I have some stuff going on, kind of laid out the details of that. It happened to tie into a change that the company had made prior to me being here, where our insurance wasn't covering some of the things that they needed. And I thought that was really interesting. And then it tied to the direct supervisor. So the direct supervisor wasn't really like asking those questions. Like, they would just call off and I was like, okay, whatever. So they weren't even inquiring, like, what's going on. And then on the flip side, they were also a little bored. So they weren't being challenged. So there was so many like little things that I think had occurred that no one had really taken the time to sit down and listen to see what was going on. And so I think that that's so important. Like, the minute you see something is not right, pull them in, ask questions. People generally will tell you. And I think if you've built the trust, which is very, very important, as we all know, like, and you have to create a safe space for them, you can more often than not find out where the issue is. Because at the end of the day, like, I don't want people to be here if they're not happy. And I say that all the time. I don't want to lose people, but I also don't want people to be here just because they're collecting a paycheck. And so, that poisons the whole team. So let's figure out a way that it's a win-win. And whether you're going to be on the team and engaged, or you need to move off the team, or maybe in a different seat of the bus, right? We talk about that all the time, which I think is really important. But at least give the option. So.
But how insightful of you that when I think a lot of leaders, when they see excessive absenteeism, people just not showing up for work, that person gets labeled, they're not a good employee, they're not reliable, they're bad. And you're taking a different perspective. You're saying something must be going on. Maybe they do hate their job, but maybe it's something else. Maybe something's going on at home. And that insight of maybe they're bored at work, I think every supervisor listening to this needs to pay attention. Monique is speaking wisdom there. Maybe they are performing below their capacity, below their ability, and they're simply not engaged because they're not being stretched. So, wow, my friend. When's your leadership book coming out?
Oh, no, you're the book writer. I'm going to just take notes from you.
Oh, gosh. No, that's so good, though, because you're looking at the whole person, not just is the job getting done or not. Yeah. And then also, I see you keeping the big picture in mind, too. How is this impacting everybody else on the team from a cultural perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you fix this? How do you course correct if a team's culture feels off track?
Well, I think there's a few different ways. I think so I always say culture is a team sport, because I remember, this was years ago, but I was tasked as a senior leader, like, you need to fix the culture. And I thought, well, I'm so sorry, but one person cannot fix the culture. I would love to be the one to take all of the credit. Okay, but let's be honest, right? So I thought about that for a long time, because I thought, well, what is the culture, right? Like, what is the culture you want to create? Because even though you go to one location, and I'll just use like a large corporation, for example, you may have 30 different locations in 15 different states. Not every location is going to have the same exact culture. And we know that, right? Because we know that there's different, the diversity, the inclusion, there's so many different things to take into account. Is it rural? Is it urban? You could go on and on. But I do think that you have to figure out, that is your first step one. Like, what do you want the culture to be? And when you can, as a group, figure out what does that culture look like, then you can start applying it and making those little tweaks. So I think you can focus on I think there's short-term and long-term things that can help, right? So I always joke around, like, feed people, like, have lunch with them. And I'm not talking about just like sending them lunch, like, be involved, like, I used to do like coffee dates for my one-on-ones. They're not expensive. You get that one-on-one time. Sometimes you can take it off site, right? Which is fantastic, because you can take people away from their element. One-on-ones are huge. I think they are underrated. And I think people do not like to do them. It's like one of those, like, check the box, right? But you truly have to make those so intentional. And I think that you do have to make an agenda. And I don't think people put enough emphasis on that. Even if you have to shorten your one-on-one versus canceling your one-on-one, I have found out more information in a one-on-one than in a month's worth of being in an office.
Yeah, so, they're insightful, aren't they? You do learn a lot.
And make them fun. I mean, they don't have to be like so structured and so black and white. I typically ask, like, I always have a fun question to ask, like almost like an icebreaker, right, for every one-on-one, or something to end with. And I think being clear is kind. I've always said that. So when you are trying to turn the culture around, you walk in and maybe things aren't going great. I do think a lot of leaders get nervous. And so they're like, well, they associate a good culture with not holding people accountable.
Ooh, yeah.
That is not the case.
Right.
And you have to be okay with being uncomfortable and having those hard conversations and being clear. I think there's a difference between being punitive and unkind versus being clear and direct feedback, giving that clear and direct feedback. And I think that's a big misconception. And then also, and this is something I struggle with even now, so I want everybody to hear this loud and clear. Not everyone is going to like you. That is very hard for me. And I have tried so many different avenues to try to do what's best and what's going to make everyone happy. It's you're always going to have someone that is not happy with the decision you make. So being okay with that. What's that saying? Like, people's opinions are none of your business.
Yeah. What people think of you is none of your business.
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard. It is. So yeah, just paving the way through consistency, trying to find the small wins while working on the long-term wins, one-on-ones, listening to people. I think that's the small steps to a long-term goal.
Gosh, I could not agree more. I think so many organizations get this wrong, and that culture is all the soft stuff that doesn't really matter, when in fact it's everything. Like, it's not an initiative. It is the initiative that allows everything else, or it's the thing that allows all the other initiatives. So culture matters so much. And if we were to connect it with, some more hard metrics, like in your experience, how does culture impact employee morale, engagement, and productivity?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it directly affects it. There's a direct correlation. So if you look at your metrics and you look at the engagement, I do strongly see, or I'm sorry, let me back up. I should say, I strongly believe that when you look at your engagement, it directly ties to not only your like employee engagement, but your member, client, patient, all of that. Because if you have an employee that is engaged, that believes in the company's why, and that company's why ties to the company, or I'm sorry, the company's why ties into their values, you will be able to see that when they're taking care of a member, patient, client, whatever it is, they're going to go above and beyond. And I see it almost every day, because when they're picking up the phone, they're not trying to figure out who I can pawn this phone call to that's going to take, that can fix this. They're going to try to fix it first. They're going to exhaust all of their efforts before they pass it on to someone else. Yeah. And I think that that's huge. When you look at retention, I mean, if you look at the cost to hire, ridiculous. I think they say now it's like 3.5 times someone's salary is what I just.
It's extraordinarily expensive. Yeah. Because you've lost, and I don't think everybody gets that. It's not just, it's expensive to hire a recruiter. It's lost productivity. It's the burnout you're putting on the other team, the inability to keep growing while you're trying to fill that vacancy. I mean, what else? What am I missing?
No, I mean, that's like, I think about that because it's the burnout. It's how you have to have other people step up. I will say, one of the things that I am most proud of is when you do have that vacancy is really try, and I know it's very hard, especially in certain industries, but you really can't just hire somebody with a pulse. Even when you see that potentially, some of your staff is being burnt out, or there is extra work that's happening, or a project that's coming up, like you have to get creative. And that's when I kind of tie back to that hiring A players, because if you don't pick the right person, you're wasting all of the training that your people are going to have to do. It's going to put them right back to square one. So on top of all the extra work they're having to cover, they're going to have to train. Right. And then you think about having to recruit again. I mean, there's so many things, right? So the retention piece is huge. I think if you can fix the hiring piece to where it correlates to the retention, then that's obviously a measurement, right? A KPI. And then just your profit, because engaged people are happy people and they want to grow. I say that all the time to my team. I want to grow. Yes, it's great to be the biggest and the best, and we want to see the numbers, but that's like the icing on the cake. The best part for me when we grow is that I get to hire more people. And they're like, oh, and they start to see, I'll get more help, right? I get more teammates. It creates more opportunity for internal promotion. I am a big believer in homegrown teams. That's probably the best thing as a leader, is being able to promote from within and grow your people. And once I can do that, it's like, I've done my job, right?
Yeah. So I hear you saying that you have seen a direct correlation between building a dynamic culture and how well your company is doing, like the metrics.
So, absolutely.
And in your model, with personal care, you call the people you serve clients?
We call them members.
Members. And so member satisfaction as well. Have you noticed a difference with that? Building huge. Culture.
Huge, because they're not only projecting their engagement and their satisfaction with the company on, going above and beyond for all of the members, but then they're also asking the members, well, do you know anybody that would want to be part of our team? So, and they're bringing people. So I often think people that are happy will recommend. people, or if they really believe in the company that they work for, they'll refer people. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that day in and day out.
Mm-hmm. You know, we have that old saying by Peter Drucker, who was just a famous leadership guru. He's no longer with us, but he famously said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." What do you think? Was he right?
Oh, yes. It's so funny. I actually always say culture eats strategy for lunch. And I say that because, culture really isn't a strategy. Culture is more of an outcome. And I think what that means to me is it's a result of all of the inputs that you do day in and day out. If you are putting into your team and people first and listening and making changes that they can see. So you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. I think that's also a large issue that we have as leaders. You pay well, you train well, you keep them engaged. All of that, all of those inputs are going to obviously give you this outcome. And that is what is going to be able to execute your strategy.
Beautiful. Well, if culture were a recipe, what 3 ingredients would you say are essential to make up culture?
Oh my gosh. It makes me think my mom used to always say, I made this with love. Whenever she would make us something, I made this with love. I'm like, and now I say that to my son, but it's true. I mean, you do have to love being a leader. So the recipe, let's see. I think the 3 top ingredients for a good culture. Well, it starts with hiring. We've talked about it. Identifying your culture and then hiring for that culture, right? I do see where you take like a top candidate from one industry and they may have a very specific culture. And then you move them to another industry thinking they're going to kill it, right? They're going to knock it out of the park because they knocked it out of the park with this organization and they're going to love this job and they're just going to fit right in. And then you bring them over and they do not fit right in. So I think when you're looking at those 8 players, that's just something I'll add. You have to look at the culture they're coming from and if they have the skill set as well. So it's not just the skills, right? But like the hard skills, they need the soft skills and then obviously see where they're coming from. Because I think if they don't fit in your culture, then even if they're a top rated candidate, they're not going to make it. And then I think you have to pay competitively. And I know that's hard. So I'm going to elaborate just a little bit. So you don't necessarily have to be the top paying in your industry. And some margins are very slim. I can speak to personal care personally. The margins are very slim. However, you cannot be below market. You have to be at or above, and then you have to find ways to be competitive, whether that's you have better benefits, right? Healthcare benefits. It can be as simple as pet insurance. I've had this actually come up, a gym membership. Look at the entire benefits package and see how you can make yourself competitive. And then again, it goes back to that shared values, shared purpose, shared values. I think you have to do a really deep dive when you're hiring people and then identify those. If you inherit a team, so obviously you're not building that culture from scratch, you need to meet with those people individually and find out early on, are they going to be able to meet that culture? Do they share the same values?
Yeah.
And are they going to be able to align with your why, your North Star as a company? And unfortunately, it's hard because you have to make that decision early on. And it may not be that you have to move them completely off the bus, but I think you need to find if they're the right fit on any other seat of the bus or if at all.
No, that's great. That's good advice. Any other advice you would give maybe a new leader who wants to be super intentional about shaping a positive team culture from their very first day on the job?
Be nosy.
Be nosy.
Be nosy. No, I think it goes back to just listening. When you first come in, you really have to humble yourself. You cannot come in thinking you know it all, even if you came from a place where you were able to turn around a culture and you did do a great job. I think you need to come in humble, heart wide open, ears wide open, eyes wide open. Listen, walk around. I say that a lot. You lead, you manage by walking around, and ask a lot of questions. Be clear. Don't be afraid for people not to like you all the time. I know it's easier said than done. And again, think of it as a team sport, right? So I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as leaders, as we should. You know, we expect excellence. We talk about it all the time. However, how are you going to emulate and show people that you expect that of yourself and that you expect it of others? And I think that's where that clear as kind comes in.
Yeah. Thanks for all of that. Well, Monique, this has been a great conversation. But before I let you go, my research assistant, Percy the penguin. Do you know about Percy?
I do. He's so cute.
Percy, he's my little buddy. He's the coolest member of the iMen team. He has a couple of questions for you. Percy, are you there? Do you have the questions for Miss Monique? Great. Thank you, Percy. So Percy's first question, he brought it to you, and he was taking notes while Heather McLean was on the podcast last week, and Heather gave us a question for you. So Heather McLean wants to know, how often do you find yourself above your own advice? And what she means is, can you think of a time when you maybe gave some coaching or mentoring advice to somebody else, but you didn't take your own advice?
Oh my goodness. That is a hard question. What a good question.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure this has happened on multiple occasions, if I'm being honest. However, I will say, so the answer is yes, it's happened. If I think about a situation that may have happened most recently, it probably goes back to the you can't please everyone. Don't care so much, people's opinions or other people's opinions, right? So I recently did receive some feedback, and my initial jerk reaction was, well, I need to just clarify with these people. They don't know the whole story. They don't see the bigger picture. And one of my dear coworkers, one of my teammates, is constantly preaching to me, the only thing you can control is your reaction. And I'm so glad that he keeps reinforcing that, because it is hard. And so I often have to pause, the power of the pause, right?
That's right.
So I think that's where sometimes I cannot take my own advice, because I truly am I'm not reactive, but I want people to understand. I want to explain the why behind things. And I think sometimes it's not warranted. You don't have to. You just stand strong in your decision.
No, that's hard. Like, we instantly feel our guard going up, and we feel our defense mechanism, that wall, rising, instead of just, okay, let me take that, let me work with it, and we'll go from there. Wow. Well, Percy also wants to know, what question would you like to ask a future guest?
Ooh.
And Percy told me to make sure I write these questions down so he doesn't have to keep telling me.
All right. I would love to know if there were ever a time in this next guest's career where they thought about leaving, like leaving it all. When I say just, it's one of those moments where you completely change industries. You just say, I can't do this anymore. Maybe you go from a leader to an individual contributor, something like that. And if they did, how it turned out, and if they didn't, what made them stay.
Wow, that's going to open up some really fun, insightful comments. Great. So if there were ever a time in their career when they thought about leaving it all, just packing it in, then if they said yes and they did that, what happened? And if they decided to stay, how'd that turn out?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Monique, this has been such a fun conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's so fun.
How can our listeners find you and or contact Inteli-Care?
Well, we have a website, Inteli-Care.com, and all of the contact information is there on the website. I also have LinkedIn, so would love to connect with people on LinkedIn.
Great, thank you. And I'll put the website for Inteli-Care. And can you tell us real quickly where your service areas are?
Yes, so we are all over the state of New Mexico.
Okay, beautiful New Mexico.
Yes,
and
you got to witness it firsthand.
I did. I loved it. I loved every moment. So Monique, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you more than you know.
Oh, well, thank you, Heather. I appreciate you.
All right. And thank you to our listeners for joining us in this conversation. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with somebody who could use a dose of inspiration and insightful conversations and creativity. And please leave us a review. I read every single one. So until next time, keep saying, I'm in to creativity and bold thinking, transformational growth, and meaningful conversations. May you be wildly creative in your life and leadership. I'll see you soon.